Kiba Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Aroti Kesova. Kiba Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Aroti Kesova. baje, bajikar thala. Shankha baje, ganta baje, bajikar thala. Madhura mridanga baje, paramarasala. Madhura mridanga baje, paramarasala. Baho koti chandra jini, vadana ujjvala. Baho koti chandra jini, vadana ujjvala. Lala deshe vana mala, kore jalamala. Lala deshe vana mala, kore jalamala. Shiva Sukha Narada, Preme Gada Gada. Shiva Sukha Narada, Preme Gada Gada. Bhakti vinoda dekhe, gaurara sampada. Bhakti vinoda dekhe, gaurara sampada. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Sunyavadi, Pastachari Satarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi, Gaura Bhaktivedanta. Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadada Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadada Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Radhe Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Everyone can do their pranams if you can, yeah. After I say every prayer, you can say Jai afterwards. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Pairajika Chacha A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Pairajika Chacha Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananti Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Nama Shashir Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Karo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadada Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Ki Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Mayapur Vrindavan Dham Ki Nilachala Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Ganga Devi Yamuna Devi Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Samveda Bhaktavinda Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi all glorious humble devotees, all glorious humble devotees, all glorious humble devotees, all glorious Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narashringaya Namaste Narashringaya Pralada Lada Daine Pralada Lada Daine Purvakshaha Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha Shilatankanakalaye Shilatankanakalaye Ito Nishinga Parato Nishinga Ito Nishinga Parato Nishinga Yato Yato Yamita To Nishinga Yato Yato Yamita To Nishinga Vae Nishinga Hridaye Nishinga Vae Nishinga Hridaye Nishinga Narashingamadhim Sharanam Prapadye Narashingamadhim Sharanam Prapadye Tavakara Kamalavare Nakamadhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tano Bringam Keshavadrita Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Tavakara Kamalavare Naka Adhuta Shringa Adita Hiranyakashipu Tano Bringa Keshavadita Nari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Jaya Nishingadev Jaya Nishingadev Jaya Nishingadev Jaya Nishingadev Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai.
Bhagavad Gita?
I think I've got one. But, yeah. So first of all, seeking blessings from the devotees and the previous acharyas. So, Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalaam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishvanusute Devi Pranamami Haripiye Vanchakapatarupyashta Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So today we'll be reading from chapter 10, verse 23 of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll say the verse and line by line, and then the whole verse, and then the last you to repeat. Rudranam Shankarashasmi Viteshur Yaksharakshasham Vasunam Pavakaschasmi Meru Shikhari Namaham Rudranam Sankarashasmi Viteshu Yaksharakshasham Vasunam Pavakaschasmi Meru Shikhari Namaham Rudrahanam Sankarashasmi Viteshu Yaksharakshasham Vasunam Pavakaschasmi Meru Shikhari Namaham. Prabhus, would you like to say the verse? Sankarashasmi Vitesu Raksharakshasham Vasunam Pavakaschasmi Meru Shikhari Namaham Rudram Sankarashasmi Vitesu Yaksharakshasham Vasunam pavakaschasmi. Meru shikarinamaham. Would you like to say? Rudranam sankarashasmi. Pitesu yaksha rakshasham. Vasunam pavakaschasmi. Meru shikarinamaham. Thank you. So now the word for word translation. Rudranam, of all the Rudras. Shankara, Lord Shiva, Cha, also, Asmi, I am, Vita Isha, the Lord of the treasury of the demigods, Yaksha Rakshasham, of the Yakshas and the Rakshasas, Vasunam, of the Vasus, Pavaka, fire, Cha, also, Asmi, I am, Meru, Meru, Shikarinam, of all mountains, Aham, I am. So translation by Prabhupada, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Of the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of Wealth, Kuvera. Of the Vasus, I am fire, Agni, and of mountains, I am Meru. So now the purport. There are 11 Rudras, of whom Shankara, Lord Shiva, is predominant. He is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord in charge of the mode of ignorance in the universe. The leader of the Yakshasas and Rakshasas is Kuvera, the master treasurer of the demigods, and he is a representation of the Supreme Lord. Meru is a mountain famed for its rich natural resources. So in this 10th chapter, we're hearing Krishna describing his own opulences. Srila Vishwanath Saraswati Thakur has explained that from the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has been explaining the process of bhakti and also somewhat speaking about his opulences as well. More specifically, in the 9th chapter, which is titled The Most Confidential Knowledge, Krishna has in more detail described the confidential process of bhakti yoga. Having concluded this discussion on devotional service on himself and the devotees, Krishna enters the 10th chapter, wherein he wants to elaborate on his own opulences in order that his devotees' faith and devotion are increased. And therefore this chapter is titled Vibhuti Yoga. Vibhuti means opulences, especially those extraordinary opulences of which this material manifestation is composed. Everything is the opulence of Krishna, and he has explained in this chapter, but still Arjuna has been seeking something specific to hear. So actually it is only a devotee that can understand Krishna's personal form and love Krishna as he is. Others cannot, and the non-devotees and the materialists cannot conceive anything beyond this material manifestation. So Arjuna wants, for the benefit of everyone in this world, he requests Krishna to describe how he pervades this entire creation. So a person who is not spiritually inclined or is not a devotee finds it hard to accommodate the idea that God is a spiritual person, with a spiritual form, in whom one must repose all one's devotion. People generally are quite materialistic and apt to see things around them with that vision. And so now Arjuna wants the people of this world to see Krishna's all-pervading nature in the things around in the universe, as manifested as the physical things of this world. That's the only way they could relate to it, and at least in this way they could make some connection to Krishna. They will make that connection and gradually make advancement in many lives. And as far as a devotee is concerned, he or she would love to hear this about Krishna because it is all about Krishna. Everything about Krishna, as Srila Prabhupada has explained in some of the purports, is nectar and relishable. So devotees like to hear anything about Krishna, especially when Krishna speaks it himself. It's all the more relishable. And this increases the devotion of the devotees, and it makes their faith very strong when you hear the glorification of Krishna. So for the sake of both the non-devotees and devotees, Arjuna is eliciting from Krishna a brief description of his own glories and opulences. And Krishna has calculated at the beginning that his opulences are unlimited, and that it's impossible for us to understand all his opulences. Krishna tells us the principal opulences of his, therefore, in this chapter. So Krishna begins this chapter speaking about his opulences from text 20. So from text 20 onwards, we are seeing Krishna talk about his vibhutis, or his opulences, and specifically how he could be seen in the physical representations of the material cosmos. Krishna has already said that he's the super soul seated in the hearts of living entities. He is the beginning, the middle, and the end of all living beings. Of the Adityas, Krishna says he is Vishnu. Of the lights, he is the sun. Of the Maruts, he is Maruchi. Of the stars, he is the moon, and so on. And now in this verse, he is also giving some more categories. Krishna wants to illustrate through the list of opulences that he is the superlative in all the categories, the best of all categories. Of the most intelligent of the intelligent, Krishna is the intelligence of that person. But that doesn't mean that the intelligence of one who is average doesn't come from Krishna as well. But still, people are impressed by the display of something extraordinary. If there's someone who is super brilliant, then everyone is amazed and say, how brilliant is that person? How much intelligence that person has? So when people admire such a thing, actually, they should remember that this is Krishna's intelligence. If somebody is very powerful, that power can also attract and astonish others. So Krishna says, I am the power of the powerful. But Krishna doesn't mean he's not the power of those who are less powerful as well. So power is the source of all power, but particularly because when Krishna manifests his power to a greater degree in a tiny human being, this astonishes everybody. So Krishna wants to remind us through this display that this is his power, and he wants us to remember this. So therefore, Krishna is mentioning himself as the superlative, or the best in each of the many categories he has identified. So the first category in this verse is the Rudras. And Krishna says, Rudranam Shankarashasmi. So Krishna is saying, among all the Rudras, I am Shankar, or Lord Shiva. In the Mahabharata, it is also explained that Rudra is a fierce aspect of Shankar. He works in particularly at the time of destruction of the universe, the ferocious form, and is full of anger because destruction takes place only when there is anger, right? So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in Canto 3, Chapter 12, there's a description of how Rudra appeared. When Brahma was contemplating the act of creation of this world, then he first created his eldest sons, the 4 Kumaras. And since he wanted to populate the universe with living beings, he instructed his 4 sons to get married and produce offspring. The 4 Kumaras, of course, as you know, had their own ideas. They didn't want to be entangled in household life, so they preferred not to follow the instructions of their father and guru, Brahma. And this made Brahma angry. But because he was such an elevated Brahmana, he tried to control his anger. He was successful, but not entirely. So when one is angry, one may try hard to control all one's anger, but somehow or another, the anger manifests. Usually the anger manifests through the eyes, if you notice. So even if one can control everything else, from the eyes you could understand that this person is angry. So when Brahma became angry, he controlled himself in every way. He didn't speak anything, he didn't lift his hand or anything like that, but his eyes revealed his anger. And because of this, between the eyebrows of Brahma came out a very unique living entity, Rudra, a baby who was mixed in color, blue and red. The Srimad Bhagavatam says blue represents the mode of ignorance, and red represents the mode of passion, because anger is a mixture of passion and ignorance. So Rudra manifested by Brahma's anger, and as soon as he came out, he was crying, and he asked his father, "Please give me a name, and please give me some places to stay." And because he was crying, Brahma pacified him and said, "Don't cry," and named him Rudra, because he was crying. So that Rudra means crying. Another meaning of Rudra is actually one who makes others cry also. So Rudra was born, and Brahma addressed him and said, "Your name is Rudra, and you also have 11 other names." And he mentioned so many other names like Manu and Dhrita, and so on, including Shiv. He said, "I have allotted a place for you, for each of you, and your forms, and I have also allotted a specific wife for each of you." So he mentioned the names of the respective wives, so all these Rudras started producing offspring. And each of these offsprings were ferocious, very, very angry, and started creating havoc everywhere, and Brahma became very perturbed. He said, "Enough is enough. This is not the time to display all this anger. Restrain yourself and perform austerities." He said, "Enough is enough. This is not the time for you to display this anger. The time for you, my dear Rudra, is at the end of creation, when the universe has to be destroyed. And at this time, I'll call upon you for this service. So now please restrain yourself and perform austerities." So then somehow or another, Rudra controlled himself, circumambulated his father Brahma, and went to perform austerities, and everything quietened down. And Brahma went ahead with the task of creation, thinking about how hard this was and how easily it could go out of hand. So usually when we create something, and we don't know whether what we have created is going to be in our control or not. Often nothing is in our control, we find, right? So Srila Prabhupada explains in this purport, in that section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that anger comes from mode of passion, and ignorance specifically from unfulfilled lust, and hankering, and this also comes from the false identification with the body. So the sense of egoism is actually the Rudra principle. And Prabhupada explains that this Rudra principle is manifest in different features that we see in this world. For example, the anger, when a person gets angry, when a person becomes very angry and moves his hands and legs about and speaks so many harsh things, we could see that the Rudra principle in nature, and this is the Rudra principle. We could see the Rudra principle also in nature, when there's like a fierce cyclone, raging winds, or the wind blows which across the sea and causes huge tidal waves, or there's lashing of rain, for example, or the fierce glare of the sun, like in the middle of the desert. So these are all representations of the Rudra principle. Also snakes, tigers, lions also manifest the Rudra principle, because by nature they are always angry. So a snake is always angry for no reason. So he represents the Rudra principle. Sometimes the Rudra principle is manifest in devotees. And when it is not being used for Krishna's purpose, then it may cause fall down. Srila Prabhupada says. So one must be very careful that the Rudra principle is used very, very carefully, only for Krishna's service and not otherwise. So Rudra is a particular manifestation of Shiva or Lord Shambhu. Lord Shiva is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord in charge of the mode of ignorance in this universe. Srila Rupa Goswami has mentioned in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has 64 qualities. To the degree he has 64 qualities in perfection and fullness. And nobody else can manifest all these 64 qualities to the degree in perfection like Krishna can. And he explains that even Narayan, Lord Vishnu, can manifest only 60 qualities. So Krishna exhibits all 64 qualities so naturally. Whatever qualities are manifest by Narayan are also in Krishna in greater fullness. So it's explained, Rupa Goswami goes to explain, that the jivas can manifest 50 qualities at the most, and that also in very infinite decimal quantities. There are another 5 qualities that are present in other great personalities like Shiva. So Shiva has 50 qualities also to a much larger degree than us, but he also has 5 extra qualities, which is that he is always situated in his constitutional position, he is all-knowing, he is always young, never old, he has a body condensed with eternity, knowledge and bliss, and finally, he is equipped with all mystic powers and opulences. Now, even these 5 qualities are present in fullness in Krishna, but not in Shiva. For example, Krishna's body is Satchinanda Vigraha, completely, but Lord Shiva's body is not completely Satchidananda. So there's some difference there. So with this, there is an example in the Brahma Samhita of the curd and the milk. Lord Shiva is like the curd, and Lord Vishnu is like the milk. When an adultering principle comes in contact with milk, like lemon or something acidic, then the milk becomes yogurt or curd. So similarly, Shiva is that form of Vishnu that is in contact with the 3 modes. Vishnu, when he's aloof from the 3 modes, he is Vishnu even in this world. But when Vishnu is in contact with the modes, specifically the mode of ignorance, he's called Shiva. And this Shiva has many manifestations, particularly the Rudras, because through the Rudras he annihilates the universe at the proper time. He performs his Tandava dance and he plays his Damaru drum. And at that time he is unstoppable. When he plays his drum and dances, he's fiery. And because Lord Shiva, and this causes destruction of the entire creation. So this is the Rudra principle. So because Lord Shiva is ultimately the origin of all the Rudras, Krishna says of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Rudranam Shankarashchasmi. Because Shiva is the superlative Rudra, the source or the topmost of all the Rudras. So next, Krishna goes on to explain that he says, of the Yakshasas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of Wealth, Kuvera. So Kuvera is the Lord of Wealth, who is the treasurer of the demigods. He is a Yakshasa. A Yakshasa is a semi-divine class of being who resides on a higher stratum than the earth. They are not quite demigods, but in between the ordinary mortals of this earthly planet, and the demigods like Indra. The head of the Rakshasas is Kuvera. It said that Kuvera and Ravana were actually half-brothers. Brahma had many sons, and one of the sons was Pulatsya. One of the sons of Pulatsya was Vishvara. Vishrava had some wives, and one of the wives was Devavarni, and Devavarni's son was Kuvera. Vishvara also had another wife, whose name was Keshini. And through Keshini, he begot Ravana, Vibhishan, Kumbhakarna, and Surpanga. So these four were therefore the half-siblings to Kuvera, because they share a common father. So Kuvera was very wealthy, and even had a celestial chariot called the Pushpak, which would travel simply by the instructions of the mind. Simply by understanding the mind of the person sitting on the chariot, it would fly to different places. This is real advancement in technology, right? We think we're advanced. But yeah, look at this. So Kuvera was very opulent, but unfortunately, his name is seen in connection with his sons, Nalakuvera and Manigriva, who because of their bad behavior were cursed mercifully by Narad Muni, and then they got the mercy. They got the mercy of Krishna in Vrindavan, and that's referring to the Damodar Leela. As we know, when Krishna was bound to the wooden grinding mortar, and his mother Yashoda left him, Krishna got angry, and Krishna he's like, he was trying to get away, and so he was crawling, and then he came across these two tall Arjuna trees. He came across these two tall Arjuna trees, and this 5-year-old boy, Krishna, and it's actually explained that these Arjuna trees are very powerful. He somehow crawled between the trees, and the trees fell down, and there was a tumultuous sound. And out of this came the two personalities, Kuvera, Manigriva and Nalakuvera. So these are actually Kuvera's sons. So one time, Ravana practically subjugated the whole universe, including his half-brother, Kuvera's land, and stole the Pushpak chariot from his brother. And Kuvera was deprived of his kingdom. And then Ravana began to live in Lanka, where Kuvera was living earlier. And then Kuvera left, as he was forcibly disposed of his kingdom. Ravana settled there with his siblings and began to terrorize the universe. Meanwhile, Kuvera performed a lot of austerities to please Lord Shiva, and he got a kingdom in the higher planets called Alakapuri. And this is said to be in the higher layers of the Himalayas, in those regions not accessible to human beings, and very close to Kailash, where Lord Shiva resides, and Kuvera still continues to be there. He one time gave his mercy to Arjuna and gave him many celestial weapons, and to Vamandev he gave the pot for begging alms. So Yakshas are classes of semi-divine beings, and Kuvera is supposed to be the chief of the Yakshas and also the Rakshasas. It is also explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 12, Verse 8, that Kuvera, the treasurer of demigods, whose only business is to supply immense riches to persons within this material world, is described as the king of kings, because unless one is blessed by Kuvera, one cannot become a king. So Krishna therefore says he is Kuvera, the chief amongst the Rakshasas and Yakshasas. The third personality that Krishna compares himself to is Vasu. So he says, of the Vasus, I am fire or Agni. So there are 8, the Vasus are a type of demigods, so there are 8 demigods known as Vasu, who represent the different aspects of nature. These elements are Prithvi, earth, Agni, fire, Vayu, wind, Jal, water, Surya or sun, Akash, or the dews, sky, which is actually represented by Bhima, we'll discuss that. Soma, moon, and Dhruva, the polar star. So once upon a time, these 8 Vasus were traveling through a forest on a vacation with their wives when they came across Vasishta Muni's ashram. Outside the ashram, they saw Nandini, Vasishta's divine cow. The wife of Prabhasa was so much observed by the beauty of the cow that she requested and urged her husband to bring the cow for her. Prabhasa tried convincing his wife that they are devas. They do not have any use for cows or cow's milk. Even though it is Nandini whose milk gives everlasting life, devas do not need it, as they are already enjoying immortality on account of being devas. So he continued most importantly. So sage Vasishta is very fond of Nandini, and it would be improper on their part to violate his integrity. Despite many attempts by Prabhas, his wife did not yield. She made imploring requests and finally succeeded in meeting Prabhasa's heart. He agreed, and thus the 8 Vasus took Nandini and her calf by force and disappeared before Vasishta, returning to the ashram. When Vasishta returned, he found that his Nandini cow was missing. He, through his divine vision, saw all that had happened. He became terribly angry and cursed the 8 Vasus to be born as mortal men in this world. When the 8 Vasus came to know of this curse, they ran into Vasishta and fell at his feet, asking for his forgiveness. Vasishta had cooled down by that time, and he said that the curse cannot be taken back. However, the effect of the curse can be reduced. He advised them to request Goddess Ganga to be their mother on earth and asked her to revive them of their birth as soon as they were born, so that the Vasus may return to the heavens without long years of suffering. He said, I could grant this reduction in effect to 7 of you who supported Prabhas in the act of stealing. Since Prabhas was the one who actually stole the cow, the curse will remain in full effect for him, and he will have to live his full lifetime on the earth like a man. However, he will live a great life and be regarded as one of the best souls to have ever walked the earth. And saying this, Vasishta went back into his meditation. Revealed to hear this, the Vasus approached Goddess Ganga and requested her to be their mother on earth and throw them into the river as soon as they were born. Ganga agreed and came to the earth and became Shantuni's wife to carry out this task. So this is why, actually, when people ask, why did Ganga sacrifice the 7 sons? So this was the reason. And she left the last one, who was later known as we know, is Bhishma, the head Vasu. So actually, Bhishma was the Vasu Dew who had tried to kidnap the cow from the sage Vasishta, and he was cursed because he was the elder one. So all these sons, Vasus were born as sons of Mother Ganga and King Shantanu, and each time the child was born, Ganga would go to the river and place their child there so that they would die because they would drown, right? So the condition Ganga had made to King Shantanu before agreeing to marry him was he would never rebuke her and never question what she did or speak harshly to her. The king agreed with this condition, and with a heavy heart, he would see that each time his wife was taking a newly born child and drowning it in the river. But he was bound by his wife and couldn't open his mouth, although he was very distraught with grief. Finally, when it was the time of the 8th Vasu, who was Bhishma, he could not hold himself no longer, so he went and rebuked his wife. "O cruel woman, why are you doing this?" At that time, she said, "All right, you have broken your promise. Therefore, I shall no longer be with you." And she disappeared with the child. King Shantanu was grief-stricken, but he couldn't do anything. Many years later, as he was strolling around in the banks of the river, he saw that the currents of the river had stopped. He went up to the river to see the cause of it, and he could see that there was one young boy had stopped the current of the Ganga with his arrows. And King Shantanu was very impressed with this. So he tried to inquire from the boy of who he is. But before he could do this, Ganga appeared and said, at that time, she said, "His name is Devarata. He is your son. So now you take possession of him and train him up nicely." So King Shantanu happily began to take care of Devarata, who later became known as Bhishma for the terrible vow he took. His vow was that he would never ascend to the throne or marry or seek company of women. And then he took this vow in order so his father could remarry to Satyavati. And Krishna says, he is Agni, or fire of all the Vasus, as fire gives warmth and energy to the rest of the elements. Finally, Krishna says he is Meru of all the mountains. He says, "Meru Shikarinam Aham." So Meru is a mountain amongst Ila Vatra, it's explained in the Canto 5 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is situated in the middle of the whole of the lotus made of pure gold. So Meru mountain is like the pre-cap of the lotus Bhumandal planetary system. The mountain's height is the same as the width of Jambudvip, or in other words, 100,000 yojanas, 800,000 miles. Of that, 16,000 yojanas, 128,000 miles are within the earth, and therefore the mountain's height is above the earth is 84,000 yojanas. So that's 672,000 miles. The mountain's width is 32,000 yojanas, which is 256,000 miles at its summit, and 16,000 yojanas at its base. So this is explained for your reference in Canto 5, Chapter 16, Verse 7 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So on top of this mountain is explained, there's a plateau where Brahma's seat is. So Brahma resides here, and where Brahma produces his sons. So this Meru mountain is considered the universal pivot, or the rest of the whole universe. Even in our chanting beads, the central bead is sometimes called the Meru bead, because we are not supposed to cross that. Once we come to that bead, we turn back, so we are never supposed to cross the beads to the other side. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 20, Verse 30, it explains that in the chariot of the sun god, the sun travels on top of the mountain in an orbit called the Samvatsara, encircling Mount Meru. So the Sumeru mountain has a very important position in Vedic cosmology. It is the huge mountain spanning the entirety of the universe inside, and Srila Prabhupada makes an important point here, that the Meru mountain is famed for its rich natural resources. So among all the mountains in the universe, Meru is the chief. So Krishna says, of all mountains, I am Meru. So in this way, we see in this verse, Krishna is giving us different categories that we see of different objects, people, etc. in this world. Krishna is illustrating that he could be seen or perceived as the best principle in all these categories. So wherever category we see, when we see the best in that, we should remember Krishna. When we see the mountain, we think of Krishna, or similarly, if you're thinking of the destruction of the universe, the Rudras, and the categories, and the Rudras and the categories of the demigods, we could think of Lord Shiva, who represents Krishna. So it's not that these principles are Krishna, in the sense that they're not directly the person Krishna, but they represent the opulences and expansions of Krishna and the energies of Krishna. They are representations of Krishna's opulences in this material world, on the physical plane. So through these examples, Krishna is teaching common men how to see his all-pervasive nature in the creation, and for devotees, it is a lesson about how wonderful the Supreme Lord is and how worthy of our devotion he is. So when we hear about all these glories of Krishna, they attract us to him, and this is why Krishna explains it to us. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions, any questions, comments? Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you for the class, Mataji. I was wondering about where did you get the notes on about Rudra and the incarnations, the 11 incarnations?
So I haven't mentioned the 11 incarnations because to be honest, it differs, so I didn't want to state exactly the names. But the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam speaks of Rudra, and also the ninth canto, it also mentions Rudra as well. Yeah. And the description of Rudra that I gave was of him being blue and red, was in, I think, chapter 20 of the Canto 3. Yeah? So I didn't want to, so it's the Shiva, the incarnations of Shiva are very, very complex and probably beyond my understanding. The whole thing's beyond my understanding, so I don't want to share something wrong. Is that okay? Yeah? Any other questions? If there's no other questions, thank you for listening. And please accept my apologies for any mistakes I made. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah. So end it there? Yeah. Jai. Padiki, Jai. Jai. The Vaishnavas ki. Jai.